Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Mets Daily here on the Fan Arch Network. John Saponaro here with you today and every day to talk about our New York Mets. And of course, before we get started, a special shout out goes to our friends over at Kalshi for sponsoring the video for a limited time. Use the code FANARCHBASEBALL on the Kalshi app to get $10 when you trade 10. The New York Mets picked up what is inarguably their biggest win of the 2026 season. It was a game that the Mets needed to win in a situation where the week dictated it, the schedule dictated it, their record dictated it, the matchup dictated it, and the Mets came through as they defeat the Phillies last night 6-4 in what was, from start almost to finish, probably the best game that the Mets have played in a lot of ways all season. It was a solid team effort from start to finish. And look, when Eric Wagaman comes in and gets you the go-ahead score, or in that case, what was the decisive score, when he comes in as a pinch hitter and gets a hit off of a lefty late in the game in a clutch situation, you know that everybody on the 26-man roster is contributing. Of course, Marcus Semien with the big triple after the foul tip, not foul tip ball that hit the ground, wasn't held, wasn't caught by JT Realmuto. That was really important as well. Cannot overstate how important that at bat was for the New York Mets. And just to be clear, I think it's pretty obvious that that was a good call by the home plate umpire because JT Realmuto did not say a word. I know the Phillies walked off. I know the Phillies were trying to sell it as if it was a strikeout and that was it. The inning was over. But once the umpire took a look at the ball, realized the ball was scuffed up, and said, no, that's a foul ball. Everybody get back here. JT Realmuto didn't say a word. The Phillies didn't say a word. I was actually surprised that Mattingly didn't come out and just argue, kind of for the sake of, a lot of times you'll get the the manager out there and just like, hey man, what about our guy? Like, come on. What did you see? But I think it was the right call. I think it's pretty clear. But he lives to fight another day. That's Semien. And then he picks up a monster triple off the wall, his first triple as a New York Met, as Marcus Semien continues to be certainly better than he was in the month of April, which we've talked about a million times on this show. He's always bad in April, despite whether he's been a good hitter, a bad hitter, a league average hitter, on the decline in the prime of his career. He's always been bad in April, so he's been better than that, and that's great. And he continues his hot hitting with runners in scoring position, as I believe he continues to lead the team in that department. Somebody who's really leading the team right now and is great and is as advertised is Juan Soto. Juan Soto gets the 2 home runs. The first one, an absolute no doubt shot. I know Citizens Bank Ballpark is tiny, but the first one he crushes in the first inning in his first at bat. And then in the second at bat for Juan Soto, he has one of the funniest home runs I think that you'll see. A pitch that Juan Soto, when he hits home runs, he knows he's got him, right? And usually it goes the other way for hitters in Major League Baseball because sometimes the wind knocks it down. You get barrel on the ball, you get your launch angle right, you get your exit velo right, everything feels good. I don't care if you've played, anything above Little League, basically, or slow pitch softball, high arc softball, modified fast softball, rec league, whatever. When you hit a ball good and you hit it square, everything just feels in sync. Your whole body just feels in sync. It's so much so that the ball jumps off the bat in a way that you don't even feel the contact. And usually, guys will hit a ball like that and the wind will knock it down, and they're surprised that the ball didn't go out. Well, here with Juan Soto, it's the exact opposite. He hits a ball that he thinks he got under, that he thinks he just flies out lazily, and that ball gets a hold of the wind, or the wind gets a hold of the ball, I should say. And it just carries and carries and carries, and it goes over the fence, even though Juan Soto was kind of tucking his head and he was mad at himself for not getting all of that ball. And then as he's rounding second base, he's like, well, I guess that's another home run. It was another home run, and the Mets are able to take care of business heading into the weird, quirky off day because of the World Cup on a Friday in the middle of a series in Philadelphia. The Mets won't wrap up this series until Saturday and Sunday, but all in all, a very, very positive team win. And again, I don't want to overstate it. Not going to sit here and say this one win changes everything for the Mets. But the Mets needed to have a week where they bounce back from losing 2 of 3 to the Reds. And they needed to at the very least, take this first game. Now, I'd like to see the Mets find a way to sneak a win in the game either on Saturday or Sunday. But we talked about it in yesterday's show where the Mets really needed to beat Aaron Nola because of who is on the horizon with Christopher Sanchez, who we'll talk about in a little bit, and Zach Wheeler on Sunday. So look, they're just human beings. They can be beat, right? But the odds are certainly in the favor of the Philadelphia Phillies over the next 2 games, especially on Sunday when we don't know who's starting that game yet for the New York Mets. It could be Tobias Myers. It could be David Peterson. It could be some combination of the two. It could be a bullpen game. It could be somebody from the minor leagues coming up, which I think that's the least likely scenario. But because you have that game on Sunday and there's uncertainty in the rotation, you kind of need to try to beat a guy who is one of the top 3 pitchers in the running for the NL Cy Young right now on Saturday in Christopher Sanchez. So when you look at that, when you're looking down the barrel of those 2 pitchers over the next couple games, it was imperative that the Mets come out big and get a win on game 1 of this series, and they did exactly that. And a big reason why they were able to do that is Sean Manaea. Got to give Sean Manaea his credit because he was exactly what the Mets needed in this game, and he has been exactly what the Mets needed recently. Ever since his inability to crack the rotation to start the season, Sean Manaea has been very, very good. He's been the kind of person who is committing to bouncing back. So I shouldn't say ever since he didn't make the rotation out of spring, because he had some really bad outings where he didn't look well. But my point is that he has not really complained, not publicly. It seemed as though he was unhappy that he's not in the starting rotation, but I think that's just his competitive nature. He was a guy who I was so down on before I started doing this show. On my other Mets show, it was a guy where you were talking about, wow, is he going to get DFA'd? Is the only reason why he's not getting DFA'd because the Mets owe him, $50 million over the next 2 seasons? But the Mets stayed patient. Sometimes because they had to, other times probably because they trusted Manaea was a pro, and Manaea seems like a good guy who's going to, again, keep his head down and work. And their patience was rewarded. And he's the kind of player, or rather his effort and his determination and his ability to eventually, it didn't happen when we wanted it to, it didn't happen as quickly as we wanted it to, but his ability to find that uptick in velocity that he talked about in spring training, he's found that now. It took him a couple weeks. It took him, I guess, about a month into the season to find it, but he has found it. And with that comes the confidence, and with the confidence comes the ability to get big league hitters out. And look, he wasn't great. He wasn't lights out, but he is a competent representative major league starter. And when you look at the Mets right now, Sean Manaea is their 3 in the rotation. Now, you don't want him to be a 3. You want better players than that. But with Christian Scott down, and hopefully it's just for 2 weeks, and with Clay Holmes down, and hopefully Clay Holmes is able to get back from this fracture in his leg quickly, sooner rather than later, and it seems like maybe there's some positive reports as far as that's concerned. With those 2 guys down and some other people being ineffective, you got Freddie Peralta, you got Nolan McLean, you got Sean Manaea, and you've just got a bunch of other question marks in the rotation. Kodai Senga, Tobias Myers, David Peterson, 3 players who have been very, very bad. So look, is it better if Sean Manaea is your 4 or your 5 like we talked about the other day? Absolutely. But right now, he is a guy that the Mets need to rely upon to make traditional starts and be competent. This is a good Philadelphia Phillies lineup. There was some holes in the lineup. They're good at home. They can hit in that ballpark. But this is a lineup that when Manaea was at his worst at points last season and to start this season, this lineup would have absolutely demolished him despite their holes. This is still a lineup that features Kyle Schwarber. This is still a lineup, of course, with Bryce Harper. JT Realmuto is not the guy that he was, but, against a lefty who's up there throwing 88-mile-an-hour fastballs, I think JT Realmuto could do some damage. I think Alec Boehm, even though he's got some down numbers, is still got some talent. And this is a guy who already knocked in a couple runs against the Mets just in this first game. So I got to tip my cap to Sean Manaea because I was so down on Sean Manaea not getting the surgery. I was so down on Sean Manaea. Basically, it seemed like putting himself in a way over the Mets, which I understand. You can't force somebody to go get surgery. It's their body. It's up to them. Every body is different. If he needed it for his health, he would obviously have gotten the surgery. But it just seemed like, wow, this guy doesn't have the velocity. This guy can't win without the velocity. Everybody goes and gets this cleanup of the bone spurs in their elbow when they need it. Tarek Skubal just went and got it. Meanwhile, the Mets desperately need Sean Manaea, and it seemed from the outside looking in for all of us fans, and that's what we are, we're outsiders, that Sean Manaea wasn't super interested in doing something like that. But I guess at this point, you have to say he was right because the velocity is back. The confidence is back, and his ability to be a competent major league starter is back. Now, I know the flip side of that might be, well, he could be even better. He could be even better if he got the surgery. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know that we're ever going to see 2024 Sean Manaea again because Sean Manaea has never been 2024 Sean Manaea at any other point except for that run that the Mets went on when, quite frankly, he was their ace and he helped carry them to the NLCS before he unfortunately ran out of gas. But let's just take a look at the line really quick. 5 1/3 innings pitched, 6 hits, 3 runs, only 2 of them earned, 1 walk, 5 Ks, and what you really like is the 95 pitches with 64 strikes. Good ratio of strikes to balls, and he came back out for that last out in the 6th inning, which I thought was important because you're facing a lefty. He was already sitting at, I believe, in the high 80s. He might have been just over 90 pitches, whatever it was, but it's definitely a situation where the Mets could have pulled him and gone right into their bullpen, which has been really, really good. We'll talk about the bullpen coming up in a second. They could have went to the bullpen right then and there, but they decided, no, you know what? With a lefty leading off the inning, Manaea says he's good to go. Let's have him go out there. Let's have him get one more out. And I think that was the smart move. Now, look, it worked out, so it's always going to seem like a smart move. But since we're giving credit to Sean Manaea, somebody who I have bashed basically since the start of the season, got to give credit later on to Carlos Mendoza, and we will do that as well. Somebody who I have bashed all season long, and I have called for his firing since the 12-game losing streak and basically every single day since that 12-game losing streak. So the Mets come out with a good victory. They get good starting pitching. They get great bullpen performance, and their offense does what needs to be done. The defense was a little down in this game, and that's a bit of a bummer because the defense has been largely pretty good. I mean, you have the exceptional play by Soto out in left field, that sliding catch, and then you have almost the exact same play by Benj out in right field, and he's not able to make that catch. Obviously, not an error, not something that you're going to get on Carson Benj about. It would have been terrific if he's able to grab that, but he can't quite squeeze it. But that's a play that a lot of the other times we've come to expect Carson Benj to make. But you get the error, non-error by Bo Bichette later in the game. You get the double play in the 9th inning that was not turned that also probably should have been turned, which made this game a little dicey, those two plays. So, defense was not super smooth. And then, of course, you get 2 errors on one play from Francisco Alvarez, which led to that unearned run from Sean Manaea. He lets strike 3 get by him, and then he throws the ball away. So not a crisp game on defense. And that you don't like to see that because the Mets need to kind of play crisp baseball throughout. Look, errors are going to happen. Physical errors happen. It is what it is. But you'd like to see the Mets play a clean game against a good team because usually you have to play clean games to beat good teams. But the Mets, if you want to take any kind of silver lining away from that, the Mets were able to play not their crispest, not their sharpest, and still win this game. So I will take that part as a positive. Baseball season is here, and you can trade every game on Kalshi. You guys know what I do. Before I hit record, I jump on the Kalshi app. I take a look at things concerning the Mets, or in this case, concerning Major League Baseball, things that are sort of Mets adjacent. And I like to see where some of your odds lie. I like to see where there's an opportunity for us to look at. And this one I thought was a bit fun. I figured since the Mets have this weird off day today, since the Mets aren't playing on a Friday, the Mets aren't playing in the middle of the series, but the Mets are playing on Saturday, and they do have to square off against Christopher Sanchez, who has been terrific. We've mentioned his name on this episode already. We mentioned him obviously in the series preview episode from yesterday. And when I was on the Kalshi app, I noticed that Christopher Sanchez winning the Cy Young is trading at 25 cents a share. And that is very enticing to me. Now look, the favorite right now is Jacob Misiorowski, but he's trading at 57 cents a share. Next after Misiorowski is Christopher Sanchez. So that shows you where the odds are. Misiorowski's sitting at about 56%, and then you've got Christopher Sanchez at 24%. And I think that that is a worthwhile investment, at least very interesting. You get good bang for your buck. So, as I always say on the show, think about it. It's kind of interesting. This one's not about the Mets, not really, although Christopher Sanchez does face off against them on Saturday, but it's something to think about. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there is no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy into and out of your position. For a limited time, you already know, download the Kalshi app and use the code FANARCHBASEBALL to get $10 when you trade 10. Kalshi, trade on anything. Must be 18 and over. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risks and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. We already touched on this a little bit, but the Mets bullpen has been absolutely electric. The Mets bullpen has been carrying them. The Mets bullpen, and I can't remember the last time that I've said this, really. It feels like the Mets bullpen is always their Achilles heel, even when they're a good team. And this is not scientific. This has nothing to do with what the Mets are going to do, if they'll rebound, how they'll rebound, what they'll become, what this team really is in 2026. But I personally want to see this team turn things around, if for no other reason than they have a great bullpen. They have the makings of what can be a terrific bullpen, a championship caliber bullpen. Again, I'm not getting ahead of myself. There's just been so many instances in my lifetime where the Mets have had a good team and the bullpen has been what's sunk them. I would hate to see a bullpen like this, because we know they're fickle year to year. I would hate to see a bullpen like this that the Mets have assembled right now go to waste. And we can talk about some of the particulars with these guys, but I just want to highlight a few of them. First of all, let's talk about Devin Williams. I know the ERA doesn't look pretty. I know he gives up a run Right now, it's on the books as an earned run. I think that's going to get changed because I think we've got an error from Bo Bichette over at third. It was ruled a hit during the game, but I think once an official scorer gets a second set of eyes on that, if it hasn't already, I haven't seen, but I think that's going to get turned around, and I think that'll go off of Devin Williams' ERA. You're going to say, well, Devin Williams in the ninth, he puts some guys on and gives up an earned run or just gives up a run in general. Kyle Schwarber smokes the ball 104 miles an hour for the final out of that game. John, what are you talking about? He wasn't good. Devin Williams is very good. I already alluded to the fact that Bichette makes either, if it's not an error, if they don't change it, it's a play Bichette will tell you he should have made. And honestly, Bichette was very, 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 very good at third base. And, he's played a lot of shortstop. I'm not making excuses for him, but he goes over to third base and then he lets his arm angle drop a little bit and he makes a bad throw. But the game should have been over right there. The game could have been over on the batter before because the Mets failed to turn a double play. I know it was a bit bang bang, but it seemed like it developed a little slow. So Devin Williams pitched a lot better than his line would indicate or than the pace of the inning would indicate. Even the hit that he gave up on an absolutely nasty airbender, it's the kind of swing that you have to just tip your cap to the hitter. It was not a bad pitch. It was not a bad pitch in a bad spot. And you got to give credit where credit is due. The other guys are up there competing too, and hitter just flicks his bat out there and is able to poke the ball over the shortstop's head. So I think Devin Williams was fine. I think Devin Williams, outside of 2 blow-up outings, has been terrific. And, those blow-up outings have inflated his ERA, and they have made things look bad or worse than they are. And I think Devin Williams deserves a lot of credit. And again, I understand a lot of Mets fans are still going to be angry because he's not Edwin Diaz, despite what's going on with Edwin Diaz. I think Met fans are going to be angry because they watched him have a bad couple months with the Yankees last season and because they think Pete Alonso broke him. What he did with the Yankees is irrelevant. What happened in that game with Pete Alonso 2 seasons ago is irrelevant. Devin Williams is here. Devin Williams is going to be the closer. He's going to be here for the rest of the year. He's going to be here for the next 2 years. So, I don't know. Just get used to him because Devin Williams is a really good pitcher. And every once in a while, he's going to have a blow-up game. And I think when we get to the end of the season, we're going to look back and we're going to see Devin Williams had a pretty damn good year. So, and again, if you wanted Edwin Diaz back, and I wanted Edwin Diaz back with Devin Williams. I don't want to relitigate the past, but I wanted it. But if you wanted him back, Edwin Diaz got hurt. Edwin Diaz wasn't good before he got hurt. And Edwin Diaz has some off-the-field issues going on that, quite frankly, have been very quiet, and maybe they've been quiet because he was hurt. I don't know what the situation is there, but it's just a headache and an additional thing that the Mets don't need. And we talk about A.J. Minter. A.J. Minter has been unscored upon in the short sample size since he's been back from the injured list. And we knew how good A.J. Minter was when the Mets signed him before last season. And it was such a blow to this bullpen when he got hurt. He didn't make a tremendous amount of appearances with the Mets before he goes down with that lat injury. He obviously misses the season. So it had been basically a year since A.J. Minter had pitched. A.J. Minter comes back and he really has not missed a beat. He has been electric. And when you combine him with Rayleigh, and I know Rayleigh's been a little out of sync pretty much for the month of June, but when you combine A.J. Minter with Brooks Rayleigh, you have 2 electric lefties in the bullpen, and A.J. Minter with Luke Weaver, who we'll talk about here in a second, makes up one of the best 7th and 8th inning combo left-righty split matchups that you can get in baseball right now. But before we talk about Luke Weaver, I want to talk about Huáscar Brazoban because Brazoban has been insanely good. He's got an ERA under 2. He leads the team. I guess technically A.J. Minter has a 0 ERA, but again, wouldn't qualify. Doesn't have the amount of innings, the amount of appearances under his belt. So technically it's A.J. Minter with his sparkling perfect 0 ERA, but Huáscar Brazoban has been so good for the Mets. And it really all started in the World Baseball Classic when he pitched for DR. He's been great since then. It feels like he just got off hot. We know he's got great stuff. We know he's a late bloomer, and he's a guy who's still got options and team control, even though he's on the latter half of his 30s. He's a weird player in that regard, but we know the stuff is there. The stuff has always been there, but he's been a guy at times the Mets have overused, and you see this season with the effectiveness of other guys in the bullpen, the Mets haven't had to overuse him, and then wow, you see what Huáscar Brosnan is actually capable of when he's not pitching seemingly every single day. He's been great. I think his ERA is sitting at either it's 1.95 or 1.91, something like that. Absolutely terrific. He has been as good as that ERA would indicate. And last but certainly not least, we got to talk about Luke Weaver. Luke Weaver has basically not been scored upon in a month and a half. Luke Weaver is one of those guys that we talked about maybe last week at some point, where it seems like he's bought in to the Justin Willard and the pitching school's approach of being nasty in the zone. Luke Weaver has really good stuff. And Luke Weaver sometimes can nibble. Luke Weaver can lose confidence. Luke Weaver, is a guy who can be prone to getting hit at times. And it seems as though he bought into, hey, you've got good stuff, throw it in the zone, try and get guys, like dare guys to hit it, basically. And what he has done in this month and a half has been insanely good. He's been such a stabilizing force for the Mets. And I think they said on the broadcast, the first time in Mets history that a relief pitcher has struck out 3 batters in an inning, struck out the side in back-to-back games, which is what he did in that 8th inning on Thursday against the Phillies, which was absolutely electric. I mean, he made short work of these guys. And they talked about it on the broadcast too. Ronnie and Gary and Keith, they were like, well, do you stay with Minter here to start the inning because you've got a lefty and easily could. Minter knows these guys so much, pitching in the NL East for the Braves. He's a guy who can, he's dealt with Schwarber, he's dealt with Harper, and maybe you keep him out there for, one more batter, kind of have this holdover situation. But the Mets didn't. Carlos Mendoza went to Luke Weaver because they had, enough of a cushion to the Mets. Maybe if it's a 1-run game, you leave Minter out there to pitch to the lefty, but instead they go to Weaver. They allow Weaver to get a clean inning, which is something that I think the Mets philosophically prefer. I think a lot of teams prefer it. They want their reliever to be out there with a clean sheet to start an inning rather than coming into somebody else's mess. And what they do, they give Luke Weaver a clean inning. They give him the lefty to start things, and it doesn't matter. He carves them up. Luke Weaver has been nothing short of terrific. And it's a good thing, too, because the Mets have signed Luke Weaver to a 2-year deal. So, again, I know these guys can be fickle. Coming out of the bullpen, they can be up, then they can be down. They have one good year, one bad year, whatever. But it's nice to see that some of these guys, regardless of what happens this season, Devin Williams, Luke Weaver, they're going to be here. They're going to be a part of this team moving forward. I don't see either one of those guys, even if everything falls apart, getting dealt at the deadline. I don't think that's going to be the route that the Mets choose to go. So I know we don't talk about selling, not yet, but it's just really great to see a Mets bullpen from top to bottom execute the way that they have. Last but certainly not least, and we won't spend a ton of time on this, but Carlos Mendoza deserves credit. What? I don't bet you thought you'd never hear me say that. I have been, like I said, pushing for Carlos Mendoza to not have a job with the New York Mets as much as I feel comfortable with, because I don't think that you should push for human beings to lose their job. I don't think that's a great thing to do. And I understand he's a baseball manager and he makes lots of money, and these positions you get hired, so eventually you'll be fired. That's kind of how it works when you're a head coach or a manager in professional sports. So it's a little different than, your neighbor next door who works a regular job. I get that, but I don't feel good about advocating for people losing their jobs. But Carlos Mendoza has been a really poor manager here with the Mets. Outside of the second half of 2024, everything else that he has done as a leader of the Mets has not been good. He is not good in some of the X's and O's. He makes a lot of confounding decisions, because I think the manager's biggest job in the game is managing the bullpen, and I don't think he's done a great job of that over his Mets tenure. And then when you start to look at the other aspects, the leadership, the accountability, well, how many times have we talked about this Mets team being a team that seems like it doesn't have any accountability and it's devoid of leadership? So when you talk about managing the 26 personalities in the room, I don't know if he's great at that either. So the criticism for Carlos Mendoza, I think, has been very, 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 very deserved and very well earned. But in this particular instance, I have to give him credit going all the way back to the way we started the show. Because in yesterday's show, I said the Mets needed to take advantage of this quirky schedule. The Mets were handed two gifts. The fact that Nolan McLean went 7 innings of really good baseball in the series finale with the Reds going into this game. And then coming out of this game, the Mets were going to have that weird, very atypical off day on a Friday in the middle of a series. So you basically have this one standalone game on Thursday night against the Phillies that you really, really needed to win, especially with Sanchez and Wheeler going the rest of the series over the weekend. And I said the Mets needed to play this like a playoff game. They needed to deploy their roster as if this was a must-win kind of back against the wall game, because you were going to be able to reset your bullpen on Friday. You were going to be able to use guys who were rested because McLean went so long in the series finale against the Reds, and that's exactly what the Mets did. That's exactly what Carlos Mendoza did. He didn't waste any time. He was savvy. He was decisive. He goes and he uses Eric Wagaman to pinch hit for A.J. Ewing, and he gets a huge hit. He pinch hits and gets Mark Vientos into the game instead of, I believe it was Jared Young. And I think Vientos walks away with a walk. Excuse me for using the word walk twice. He then manipulates his defense, takes advantage of his entire roster, puts Beatty out in right field and gets Bichette over to third and Zach Short in there for defense and Carson Benj over to center field. Vientos plays first, and he's able to use the versatility on his roster in a very, very creative, very smart way. He also leaves Manaea in for that extra batter to start the 6th inning, which was a really smart move. He goes from AJ Minter, who he could have left in the 8th inning, and decides not to, and he goes right to Luke Weaver. And Luke Weaver responds with that unbelievable inning where he just blows through the Phillies lineup. So everything that Mendoza did during this game, obviously it worked. So we're going to say it was right. But everything that he did made sense in the moment. You go and you use your roster to the fullest extent. Now, sometimes in the course of 162, you can't do that. Sometimes relief pitchers aren't available. Sometimes, you don't want to pinch hit for a guy in a certain spot because, later in the game, you don't want the lesser player maybe to come up when you might need to win that game or whatever. But he used the guys in the right spot. He pushed all the right buttons and he put players in positions to succeed. Now, the one caveat to that is when you put Bo Bichette at third and you bring in Zach Short cold off the bench, you put Beatty in right field and you have Vientos in at first base and you move Carson Benj to center, you have weakened your defense in the last, inning of that game. And I think that reared its head because the Mets had at least 2 misplays in that inning that almost turned the game on its ear. But those are the players he has at his disposal. I don't love Beatty in the outfield. Benj is fine in center, but I think we know he's better in right. I think Bichette is a really good third baseman. He's grading out that way, but he just hasn't played there a lot because of Lindor's injury. So he seems like, even though he's not a great shortstop, he's just been a little bit more comfortable because he's been doing a lot of that. We know Vientos is terrible at first. And again, Zach Short's a good defender, but he's coming in cold in a game that's really important. So it's not perfect, but those are the pieces he has to work with, and he deployed them in a way that made sense, and the Mets won the game. So for a guy that I've been giving a lot of flack all year, I got to tip my cap to Carlos Mendoza, and maybe a little bit of it is biased because I said that he should manage the game this way, and he went and managed the game the way that I suggested. But I think we could all agree that when you have a weird quirk in your schedule like this, and you are handed this gift of Nolan McLean giving you 7 strong innings heading into it, you kind of have to treat this game this way. So the Mets did not waste any time. They kept the hammer down. They were smart. They were savvy. They were deliberate. And they won the game. They won a game they absolutely needed to win. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of Mets Daily. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're sitting at just over 4,000 subscribers, and we would love to get to 5,000 in the near future. But more importantly than that, we would love for you to be a part of it. Until next time, I'm John Saponaro. See you on Monday. Let's go, Mets.